Adrian Mutu's cocaine sacking. Chelsea paid £15.8 million for Adrian Mutu in 2003, expecting the next great European striker. What they got was a 2004 drug test that came back positive for cocaine. Mutu didn't hide it, he admitted it. But instead of supporting him through rehab, Chelsea's new owner Roman Abramovich decided to make an example of him. They sacked him for gross misconduct, and then sued him for breach of contract. The legal war lasted over a decade, with FIFA and the Court of Arbitration for Sport eventually ordering Mutu to pay Chelsea €17 million in damages. It remains the largest individual fine ever handed to a player. Mutu's career was effectively ruined in England, and the case highlighted a brutal shift in football. Players were no longer just employees. They were high-value assets, and if they broke, the clubs would sue them for every penny they were worth. The John Terry and Wayne Bridge saga. In our last video, every Premier League fanbase's most painful moment, we talked about the Battle of the Bridge, but the real battle happened off the pitch. In 2010, the news broke that England captain John Terry had been having an affair with Vanessa Parencel, the former partner of his teammate and close friend Wayne Bridge. It was a scandal that split the England dressing room right before a World Cup. Fabio Capello stripped Terry of the captaincy, and the following season, we got the most famous non-handshake in history when Bridge refused to touch Terry's hand during the pre-game lineup. It wasn't just about cheating, it was about the violation of the brotherhood that players preach. Terry was already a controversial figure, but this cemented his role as the league's ultimate villain. Bridge eventually retired from international football, refusing to play alongside a man who had betrayed him so personally. If you haven't seen that previous video where we break down the players involved in that era, go check it out to see how the tension on the pitch was fueled by the drama in the tabloids. Nile Ranger's criminal record. Nile Ranger is the ultimate level 1 broken promise. He had the talent to be a Newcastle legend, but he had a habit of treating the legal system like a challenge. By the age of 27, Ranger had been arrested for armed robbery, at age 15, assault, criminal damage, and conspiracy to defraud. In 2017, while playing for Southend, he was sentenced to 8 months in prison for his role in a phone scam that targeted an elderly woman. He even had his own name tattooed on his forehead, which is probably the most helpful thing a criminal has ever done for a police lineup. Ranger is the personification of wasted potential. He was sacked by almost every club he played for, not because he couldn't play, but because he couldn't stay out of a courtroom. He's the only player in history who could probably build a 6,500-word script just out of his own police statements. The Malky, Mackay and Iain Moody dossier. This is the scandal that ripped the old boys club mask off the Premier League. In 2014, Malky Mackay was the hotshot manager who had just taken Cardiff City to the Premier League. Iain Moody was his trusted head of recruitment. But after a fallout with Cardiff's owner, Vincent Tan, the club's investigators stumbled upon a digital graveyard. They found over 10,000 text messages exchanged between Mackay and Moody that weren't just banter. They were a masterclass in prejudice. The messages contained vile racist slurs about players and agents, homophobic comments about officials, and sexist remarks that would make a Victorian villain blush. One message mocked the arrival of a Jewish agent by saying, "Nothing like a Jew that sees money slipping through his fingers." Another referred to an African player as a monkey. When the FA investigation launched, it wasn't just about Mackay. It was about the culture that allowed these two to operate at the highest level of English football while holding these views. Mackay's career in the top flight vanished instantly. He went from being a Manager of the Year candidate to a man radioactive to sponsors. This wasn't just a couple of bad texts. It was a dossier of hate that proved the Premier League's kick-it-out campaigns hadn't reached the executive offices yet. The Gary Cook and Dr. Onuoha email. At Manchester City, just as the Abu Dhabi era was beginning, Gary Cook was the CEO. He was the man responsible for the Welcome to Manchester Carlos Tevez billboard. He was the face of the new, aggressive city. But in 2011, he committed an act of such staggering cruelty it still feels surreal. Needham Onuoha's mother, Dr. Antonia Onuoha, who was also acting as his agent, was battling terminal cancer. She was in a heated contract negotiation with Cook and the city board. During the back and forth, Dr. Onuoha received an email that was clearly intended for City's football administrator, Brian Marwood. In the email, Cook mocked Dr. Onuoha's illness, using her cancer as a punchline. He wrote, "Ravaged with it. I don't know how you slept at night. You must be a better man than me." He was literally making fun of a woman dying of cancer because she was being a tough negotiator. When the email went public, Cook initially claimed his account had been hacked, the classic 2011 excuse. But the internal investigation proved he'd sent it from his own iPad while on vacation. Cook resigned, but the scandal left a permanent stain on the club's early glamour years. It showed the cold, corporate heart of the modern game, where even a life-threatening illness was seen as a leverage point or a joke. The 2015 Leicester City Thailand incident. This is the butterfly effect scandal of the century. In May 2015, Leicester City had just completed their great escape from relegation. To celebrate, the club went on a goodwill tour of Thailand, the home of their owners. But three young players, Tom Hopper, Adam Smith, and James Pearson, the son of the manager, Nigel Pearson, decided to film a sex tape in their hotel room with local women. That's bad enough, but the audio was the real killer. The players were heard using disgusting racist slurs toward the women, including calling them slit eyes. The video leaked, and the backlash in Thailand was so severe that the King of Thailand was reportedly offended. Leicester didn't just fine them, they terminated all three contracts immediately. But here's the kicker, because James Pearson was involved, his father Nigel's relationship with the owners became untenable. Nigel Pearson was sacked. Who did they hire to replace him? Claudio Ranieri. A year later, Ranieri led Leicester to the 5,000-1 Premier League title. Without a racist sex tape in Bangkok, the greatest underdog story in sports history never happens. It is a dark, twisted irony that a moment of pure ignorance led to a moment of pure magic. George Graham's Bung scandal. Back in the early 90s, Arsenal was boring Arsenal. But behind the scenes, things were much more interesting and illegal. George Graham, the man who led Arsenal to 2 league titles, was found to have accepted £425,000 in bungs or illegal payments from Norwegian agent Rune Hoge. The money was a gift following the signings of John Jensen and Paul Lydersen. In today's money, that's millions of pounds floating around in brown envelopes. When the Premier League was still in its infancy, this was the first major blow to its integrity. The FA didn't hold back. They banned Graham from football for a year and Arsenal sacked him immediately. It was the ultimate betrayal of the Arsenal way. Graham eventually returned to management with Leeds and even Tottenham, but his legacy was forever stained by the image of a manager taking kickbacks to sign players who, frankly, weren't even that good. Jensen famously scored 1 goal in 132 games. You'd think for nearly £500,000, you'd get a winger who could actually hit the target. The Saido Berahino 8-week secret. For a long time, the Premier League and the FA had a gentleman's agreement about drug testing. If a player tested positive for a recreational drug out of competition, they wouldn't be named, they'd just disappear from the squad for a few weeks with a mysterious lack of fitness or personal issues. Saido Berahino was the poster boy for this cover-up. In late 2016, the West Brom striker, who had once been valued at £25 million, vanished. He didn't play for 8 weeks. Tony Pulis, his manager, kept saying he was away at a fitness camp in France. The truth, which only came out months later after Berahino moved to Stoke, was that he had tested positive for MDMA. Berahino claimed his drink had been spiked at a nightclub, but the damage was done. The scandal wasn't just the drug use. It was the way the league allowed a club to lie to the fans and the media for 2 months. It raised the question, how many other players have had fitness camps in France that were actually secret drug bans? Berahino's career never recovered. He went from a level 5 producer to a level 1 broken promise, haunted by the fitness camp, that became the punchline of his career. The phantom owner of Portsmouth. Imagine a Premier League club being bought by a billionaire who doesn't exist. In 2009, Portsmouth was in financial freefall. In stepped Ali Al-Faraj, a Saudi billionaire who reportedly had more money than God. He bought the club from Suleiman Al-Fahim, another questionable figure. But here's the catch, Ali Al-Faraj was never actually seen. No photos, no interviews, no appearances at Fratton Park. Some journalists began to wonder if he was even a real person or just a front for a group of creditors. Under this phantom ownership, Portsmouth became the first Premier League club to enter administration. Players weren't being paid, the water was turned off at the training ground, and the club was stripped for parts. It was financial terrorism. The Premier League's fit and proper persons test was exposed as a complete joke. They had allowed a historic club to be sold to a man who might as well have been a ghost. Portsmouth was relegated, docked points, and spent the next decade in the lower league wilderness. The Battle of Bramall Lane. March 16, 2002. Sheffield United vs West Brom. While this happened in the First Division, now the Championship, it is the dark precursor to the Premier League's obsession with discipline. This is the only game in English professional history to be abandoned because one team didn't have enough players left on the pitch. Neil Warnock's Sheffield United were losing 2-0. In the 65th minute, their keeper was sent off. Then, Warnock subbed on Jorge Santos. Santos had a history with West Brom's Andy Johnson. Johnson had fractured Santos's eye socket in a previous game. Santos's first act? A 2-footed, career-ending lunge on Johnson. Red card. In the ensuing brawl, United's Patrick Suffo headbutt a player. Red card. United were down to 8 men. Then, mysteriously, 2 more United players suffered injuries and walked off the pitch. With only 6 players left, the referee had no choice but to abandon the game. It was a calculated, cynical move to try and get the game replayed. The FA was furious, Warnock was accused of orchestrating the injuries, and Sheffield United were fined heavily. It remains the darkest day of English sport, a moment where the competitive spirit was dragged behind the shed and shot. The Marcus Babbel illness conflict. Marcus Babbel was a level 5 defender for Liverpool during their 2001 treble-winning season. But he was suddenly diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare condition that attacks the nervous system. He was paralyzed and nearly died. The scandal isn't the illness, it's the way Liverpool manager Gerard Houllier handled his return. Houllier accused Babbel of lack of professionalism and faking his fitness levels when Babbel couldn't get back to his peak. He was publicly humiliated by the club he had nearly died for. Babbel eventually left for Blackburn, but the fallout exposed a dark side of management. Once a player is no longer a useful tool, even a life-threatening illness won't stop a manager from throwing them under the bus. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this, leave a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe cause I'll be posting frequently here. And if you're interested in the players who actually played through these eras, you have to check out my previous video on 7 levels of Premier League rivalry. You might find a few of the names mentioned here in the higher levels of the pitch.